What can we do if we think that there is a conflict between science and the Christian faith? I'm joined today by Dr. Gavin Ortlund, who has some ideas for us to consider. Dr. Ortlund is a Christian scholar and a pastor. Gavin, in previous episodes, we've been talking about the fact that church history can be a useful guide, can be a useful teacher as we try to wrestle through contemporary science-faith issues. And one of the things that you have said that church history can do for us is to help us expand our doctrine of creation. Could you unpack that a little bit for me?
Yeah, well, there's two examples of that have been helpful for me personally, and they both come from St. Augustine, who's someone I've spent some time reading and I've really learned a lot from. And one of them has to do with animal death, because this is one of the great challenges that comes up, is animal death before the fall of human beings. What do we do with that? And I actually don't think that being a young earth creationist totally takes that off the table, because a lot of young earth creationists admit, well, some animals have to die just to get to day 6. But I do think it's an issue that needs to be addressed. And I guess I, for some reason, had the idea that all throughout church history, everybody saw there can't be animal death before the fall. And that's kind of the default view. And the modern kind of old earth creationist views are kind of deviations from the norm. And St. Augustine was an example that that's really not the case. He talks a lot about animal death. He talks a lot about insects. He talks about the beauty of animals. And he says we should be careful not to sit in judgment on the way God has made the world. And he uses the metaphor of a lay person walking into a mechanic's shop. So obviously in his day, he's not thinking of cars, but machines of some kind. And he's saying how arrogant and foolish it would be for this lay person who doesn't know anything about the machines to start making judgments about, well, this one is good and that one is bad, and why do you have this one here? And he says that's kind of like when we sit in judgment on God's creation just because we don't understand how it works. We're like a lay person. We don't know everything. We should be more humble and careful before saying, well, that's evil. And he says that specifically in the context of dealing with animal death. And I think one of the passages on his mind there is Psalm 104, which depicts God's work of creation and then his providential oversight of creation in ways that don't seem to have this idea that all animal death and all animal suffering is bad necessarily. And I will grant that this is a tough issue. It has an emotional power to it, but I just think at the very least, someone like Augustine can help us recognize it's not quite so obvious as some people say. And even before the issues of modern science, you have people approaching this in a different way. The other area would be, I somehow thought when I was growing up that it's always better for God to create instantaneously than gradually and supernaturally rather than through natural processes. And I don't know why I thought that, but I did. And Augustine helped me with that because he has this idea of the seminal reasons or causes, and he talks about God sort of implanting seeds in creation that can unfold. And that idea can be misused by evolutionary theorists. He's not talking about evolution per se, but he is saying that God can create through intermediate causes, and that when that happens, it's no less a display of God's wisdom and power. So if a tree, if I'm on a hike with my son and I say, Isaiah, isn't that tree beautiful? God made that tree. If the tree came about through a seed and water and sunlight and time, that's not at all at odds with my statement that God made it. And I remember learning about the moon. Where did the moon come from? And the scientists say they just actually discovered this recently, or they've theorized it recently, that it was a meteor hitting the earth and scattering debris, and then it slowly coalesces. And let's say hypothetically that that's in fact true. Does that give less glory to God as the creator of the moon than if God had just said, poof, there it is? Well, I don't think necessarily that's the case. Either way, it's God who's doing it. And I believe God creates through both natural and supernatural means, but I think they're both a reflection of his wisdom and power. And St. Augustine was someone who helped me think about that.